Hey friends, today I want to tell you another chilling story. This one is a stark reminder of how obsession can hide in plain sight and how a few casual dates can spiral into a fatal nightmare. It was a quiet Tuesday evening in London. Harvey Nichols, one of the city's most exclusive department stores, was about to close for the night. 22-year-old Clare Bernal stood behind her beauty counter, looking forward to going home. In just 10 minutes, her shift would be over. She smiled at her colleague and glanced at her watch. But in those final moments, everything changed. A shadow fell behind her. It was a man. In front of horrified customers and staff, he raised a gun to the back of her head and pulled the trigger. This is the story of Clare Bernal, a young woman with dreams, ambitions, and a whole life ahead of her. A life that was stolen in the most brutal way possible. Clare Bernal was born in 1983 in Tunbridge Wells, a historic spa town in Kent, England. She grew up in a loving, close-knit family. Her mother, Patricia Bernal, was devoted to her children. Clare had a brother she was particularly close to. The family lived in Tunbridge Wells, a charming town known for its Georgian architecture and strong sense of community. From a young age, Clare showed a bright and curious personality. She was a lovely child who brought joy to everyone around her. She had a natural warmth that drew people to her, and a kind heart that stayed with her throughout her life. Clare attended local schools in Tunbridge Wells, where she was a good student. She was particularly interested in art and anything to do with beauty and fashion. As a teenager, Clare developed a real passion for makeup and beauty. She would spend hours experimenting with different looks. Her friends often came to her for advice. Clare had a natural eye for what looked good, and she loved helping others feel confident. Throughout her teenage years, Clare remained close to her family. She had a special bond with her mother, Patricia, and maintained a strong relationship with her brother. After finishing school, Clare enrolled in beauty consultancy and theater makeup courses in Kent. She practiced constantly and built up an impressive portfolio. Clare had big dreams. She wanted to work at Harvey Nichols in Knightsbridge, one of the most exclusive shopping destinations in the world. Clare researched the luxury brands sold at Harvey Nichols and fell in love with La Prairie, an expensive Swiss skincare line. She wrote directly to the company, explaining why she would be perfect to represent them. Her enthusiasm impressed them, and she got an interview. In 2003, at just 20 years old, Clare traveled from Kent to London with her brother for support. She got the job and moved to Dulwich, finding a flat with 2 roommates. At 22, Clare was living her dream. She was known at work as a skincare expert who really cared about her customers. Life was exciting. Clare had her roommates, who became close friends. She visited her family in Kent regularly. Everything was going according to plan. But none of us can predict what's coming. And Clare had no idea that working at Harvey Nichols would lead her into a nightmare. In 2004, a man named Michael Pech started working at Harvey Nichols as a security guard. Michael was 30 years old and had recently moved to London from Slovakia. He was a former soldier who had served in the Slovakian military. After leaving the army, he had worked at the American Embassy in Bratislava. In 2003, he came to the UK on a student visa. While he was in Britain, Slovakia joined the European Union, which meant Michael now had the right to live and work there permanently. Michael was going through a divorce. His wife was back in Slovakia. He was living alone in London, working as a security guard and trying to start over. On the surface, he seemed like a normal guy just trying to make a fresh start in a new country. As a security guard, Michael worked all over the store. He would see the same staff members every day. And one of those staff members was Clare Bernal, the beautiful young woman who worked at the La Prairie counter. Michael became interested in Clare and eventually worked up the courage to ask her out. In January 2005, Clare agreed to go out with Michael. She was flattered by the attention. He seemed nice enough. They both worked at the same place, and she thought it might be fun to get to know him better. Over the next 3 weeks, they went on 3 dates. For Claire, it was casual. She was just dating and having fun. She didn't see it as anything serious. Michael was older. He was going through a divorce, and she thought they were just keeping things light. But Michael saw things very differently. After just one date, he told Claire that he loved her. Claire was shocked. They barely knew each other. It was way too soon for such intense feelings. She didn't know how to respond. This was the first sign that something wasn't right. But Claire was young and perhaps a bit naive about relationships. She didn't recognize this as the massive red flag that it was. Over those 3 weeks, Michael's behavior became increasingly concerning. He was intensely jealous. He didn't want Claire to spend time with her friends. He got upset when she talked about visiting her family. He wanted her to spend every moment with him and only him. He was possessive and controlling in a way that made Claire deeply uncomfortable. This wasn't normal behavior for someone you've been on 3 dates with. This was obsessive. In February 2005, Claire decided she had to end things. Michael had gone back to Slovakia for a visit, and when he returned, he demanded that Claire meet him at the airport. She did. They went back to her flat in Dulwich, and Michael tried to pressure her into letting him stay the night. Claire said no. But Michael refused to leave. He came up with excuse after excuse. He claimed his suitcase was too heavy to carry across London. He just wouldn't go. Finally, Claire agreed to walk with him to the train station just to get him out of her flat. But when they got to the station, Michael refused to get on the train. That was the breaking point for Claire. She told him clearly and directly that their relationship was over. She didn't want to see him anymore. Claire went back to her flat thinking that was the end of it. But Michael followed her. He stood outside her flat for 2 hours, calling her phone over and over again. Claire counted around 20 calls. She didn't answer a single one. Her roommate asked him to leave. Michael became abusive and started shouting. The situation was escalating, and Claire was starting to feel scared. The next day, Michael showed up at Claire's flat again with flowers. Claire refused to accept them and wouldn't speak to him, but Michael just stood outside, waiting. This became a pattern. He would appear at her flat and wait for hours, hoping she would come out and talk to him. The problem was that Claire and Michael worked in the same building. Every single day at work, Claire had to see him. But Michael wasn't content to just cross paths with her naturally. He went out of his way to be near her. He would follow her around the store. He stared at her constantly. He used the mirrors throughout the store to watch her and see what she was doing. He went to her counter repeatedly, asking her to take him back, telling her over and over that he loved her and insisting that she loved him too. Michael even tried to get other employees to talk to Claire on his behalf. He was desperate to get her attention any way he could. One day, as Claire was leaving work, Michael grabbed her. He was shouting that he loved her and knew she loved him back. When Claire told him she didn't love him, he called her a stupid little girl. The text messages were relentless. Michael sent Claire around 50 messages every single day. At first, the messages were pleading. He wrote about how they were meant to be together and how much he loved her. When Claire continued to ignore him, the messages changed. They became darker and more threatening. Michael wrote that he would kill himself if they couldn't be together. Then he wrote something even more chilling. "If I can't have you, no one will." Claire's life became a living nightmare. There was no escape from Michael. He was at the train station, where she caught the train to work. He followed her on the train. He stood outside her flat for hours. He was at her workplace all day. She couldn't sleep. The stress was affecting her health. She developed several eye infections from lack of sleep and constant anxiety. She no longer loved the job she had worked so hard to get. She dreaded going into work. She couldn't concentrate and started showing up late. But despite all of this, Claire was reluctant to report Michael to the police. Her mother, Patricia, later explained that Claire felt embarrassed. She thought that because Michael hadn't actually hurt her physically, the police wouldn't take it seriously. She worried she would be wasting their time, This is something we see far too often. Victims of stalking don't report it because they think it's not serious enough. They don't realize that this kind of behavior is absolutely a crime and that they deserve protection. On March 30th, 2005, things took a violent turn. Claire was on her way home from work when she saw Michael on the underground platform. She tried to avoid him by running down the platform and jumping onto a train, but Michael saw her and got into the same carriage. As soon as the train stopped at the next station, Claire jumped off and tried to run, but Michael caught up with her and knocked her over. She fell to the ground. Claire finally had enough. She told Michael that if he didn't stop harassing her, she would have to report him to the police. Michael's response was terrifying. He looked at her and said, "If you report me, I will kill you." Claire managed to get on another train. Michael banged on the windows and shouted at her as the train pulled away. Claire was shaking with fear. That threat was the final straw. She knew she had to take action. Claire went straight to the head of security at Harvey Nichols. They reviewed the security camera footage from inside the store, and they could see everything Claire had been telling them about. They saw Michael following her, watching her, lingering near her counter. It was all right there on camera. Harvey Nichols moved Michael to a different floor, hoping that would help. It didn't. Michael continued to return to the beauty department where Claire worked. He couldn't stay away. The store suspended Michael and advised Claire to report the situation to the police. Claire finally made that report. During Michael's disciplinary hearing at Harvey Nichols, something deeply disturbing came to light. Michael had asked one of Claire's colleagues a chilling question. He wanted to know what the maximum sentence for murder was in the UK. When Claire heard about this, she was extremely frightened. This wasn't just harassment anymore. Michael was thinking about killing someone, possibly her. Michael was fired from Harvey Nichols. The police arrested him and charged him with harassment and threatening to kill. But then he was released on bail with conditions that he was not allowed to contact Claire. Anyone who understands domestic violence and stalking knows that bail is often the most dangerous time for victims. And that's exactly what happened here. Even with the threat of going back to prison, Michael would not stop. He showed up at Claire's flat multiple times. Claire was so scared that she moved to a new flat and changed her phone number. She thought this would finally give her some peace. But within days, Michael found out where she was living. Claire arrived home one day to find him waiting outside her new flat. Claire reported this to the police, and Michael was arrested again. This time he was charged with threatening to kill. Things were finally being taken seriously, or so Claire thought. In July 2005, Claire tried to move forward with her life. She went on a birthday trip to Florence, Italy, with her mother, Patricia. They had a wonderful time together. For a few days, Claire could breathe. She could enjoy herself without constantly looking over her shoulder. It was the break she desperately needed. While Claire was trying to rebuild her life, Michael was making his own plans. He was out on bail awaiting trial. The authorities had not taken his passport. Nobody was tracking his movements. So, Michael went to Slovakia. While there, he spent time at a firing range. He applied for a gun license and took the required training and exams. He passed. Then he bought a handgun and registered it with the police in Slovakia. Everything he did was technically legal in Slovakia. Michael then took a coach back to the UK with a handgun hidden inside his luggage. He wasn't searched at the border. Nobody noticed anything suspicious. He smuggled that gun into the country with no problems at all. And Claire had no idea. Nobody had informed her that Michael was even out of the country, let alone that he was back. 6 weeks later, Michael appeared in court. On the advice of his lawyer, he pleaded guilty to harassment. The case against him was strong, and his lawyer knew it. However, the charges of threatening to kill were dropped due to lack of evidence. Michael was released on bail again while reports were prepared for his sentencing hearing. Claire felt an enormous sense of relief. She told her mother, "Mom, thank God it's over. Now finally people will believe me and I can get on with my life." Claire thought her nightmare was ending. She believed that Michael would be sentenced soon and she could finally move forward. She had no idea that she had less than 2 weeks to live. It was a Tuesday evening, just 2 weeks after Michael's court appearance. Clare was at work at Harvey Nichols. It was 7:50 in the evening, and the store was about to close at 8. There were only a few customers left in the building. Clare and her colleague were tidying up their counter, looking forward to finishing for the day. Clare's colleague put her hand up and looked at her watch, signaling that they only had 10 minutes left. Clare gave her a beautiful smile. It was almost time to go home. But then Clare's colleague saw something. A shadow out of the corner of her eye. A man moving behind Clare. It was Michael Pech. He was high on cocaine. He had entered through a back door and walked straight to the La Prairie counter where Clare was standing with her back to him. In his hand was the gun he had bought in Slovakia. Michael raised the gun and shot Clare in the back of the head. She fell to the ground. Then he shot her 3 more times in the face. 4 shots total. Clare's colleague and the few remaining customers watched in horror. Before anyone could react, Michael fired 1 shot into the ceiling. Then he turned the gun on himself and pulled the trigger. Clare Bernal died instantly. She never knew what was coming. One of Clare's friends later said that she would have been dead before she hit the floor, and he hoped she had no idea what was happening. In the middle of one of London's most prestigious department stores, in front of witnesses, 22-year-old Clare Bernal was murdered by a man she had dated for just 3 weeks. Police arrived at Patricia Bernal's home to tell her what had happened to her daughter. Patricia immediately knew who was responsible. She knew it was Michael Pech, the man who had terrorized Clare for months, the man the system had repeatedly failed to stop. An inquest was held to examine the circumstances of Clare's death. Questions were asked about why Clare hadn't been better protected. It came out that the police officer assigned to Clare's case was young and dealing with a heavy workload. The training for handling domestic violence and stalking cases was just 1 day, 1 single day. The officer had failed to complete a risk assessment form for Michael, but the coroner determined that even if the form had been filled out, Michael would likely have been assessed as low risk because he had no previous criminal record. The coroner ruled that Clare had been unlawfully killed, but that her death could not have been anticipated. But many people disagreed with that conclusion. The system had failed Clare at every turn. Michael had been arrested twice for harassment and threatening to kill her. Yet, he was repeatedly released on bail. He was allowed to keep his passport and travel freely to Slovakia, where he bought a gun. He smuggled that weapon back into the UK. And Clare was never informed that he was out on bail or that he had left the country. Patricia Bernal refused to let her daughter's death be in vain. She connected with other families who had lost loved ones to stalkers. Together they formed an organization called Protection Against Stalking. Their mission was to change the laws and make sure what happened to Clare would not happen to anyone else. They campaigned tirelessly for stalking to become a standalone criminal offense in the UK. At the time of Clare's murder, stalking was not specifically illegal. Stalkers could only be charged with harassment, which didn't capture the severity of their behavior. Patricia and the other families met with politicians. They shared their stories. They explained why the law needed to change. David Cameron, who was Prime Minister at the time, listened. He agreed that stalking was an abhorrent crime that made life hell for victims. In 2012, 7 years after Clare's murder, new legislation was passed. Stalking became a specific criminal offense with serious penalties. The law acknowledged that stalking was not just harassment. It was a pattern of behavior that caused fear and distress and often ended in violence. Protection Against Stalking also set up the National Stalking Helpline, which is now run by the Susie Lampla Trust. This helpline provides support and advice to people who are being stalked. In recognition of her tireless campaigning, Patricia Bernal was awarded an MBE, Member of the British Empire, in the Queen's Birthday Honours List in 2021. Clare Bernal should be remembered for more than how she died. She was a young woman with dreams and ambitions. She worked hard to get the job she wanted. She was good at what she did and loved helping her customers. She had close relationships with her family and friends. She had a whole life ahead of her. But Claire's death was not meaningless. Because of what happened to her, and because of her mother's courage in fighting for change, thousands of people have been better protected. The laws around stalking are stronger. Police receive better training. Victims are taken more seriously. Claire's story has raised awareness about the dangers of stalking and the warning signs that should never be ignored. Stalking is not romantic. It's not someone who just can't let go. It's a crime. When someone tells you they love you after one date, that's not love. That's obsession. When someone won't accept that a relationship is over, that's not persistence. That's dangerous. When someone follows you, watches you, bombards you with messages, and threatens you, you are in danger. Claire tried to handle the situation herself. She was embarrassed. She didn't want to make a fuss. She worried about wasting police time. But stalking is never the victim's fault, and it should always be reported immediately. If you or someone you know is being stalked, please reach out for help. Contact the police. Call a stalking helpline. Tell someone you trust. Don't wait. Don't hope it will get better on its own, because as Claire's story shows, it can escalate to murder. On that September evening in 2005, a bright young woman's life was stolen. Clare Bernal never got to see what her life could have become. She never got to advance in her career, get married, have children, or grow old. All of that was taken from her by a man who couldn't accept rejection. Patricia Bernal lost her daughter in the most horrific way imaginable, but she found the strength to turn that tragedy into something positive. She made sure that Claire's death led to real change. Thanks to Patricia's efforts, the law is better, support services are stronger, and more people understand the true danger of stalking. Clare Bernal's story reminds us that we must listen when someone tells us they're being stalked or harassed. We must take it seriously. We must offer support and help them get to safety. And we must never, ever dismiss someone's fears as overreacting, because the difference between life and death can be whether we believe them. Rest in peace, Clare Bernal. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you can be the first to hear about such real-life stories.